Two.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us this week for the County Executive's weekly media briefing. I'm Nordea Lewis with the Office of Public Information. As a reminder, this briefing is being recorded. Joining us today is Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich. We also have the Director of Health and Human Services, Dr. James Bridgers. Dr. Nina Ashford, Montgomery County's Chief of Public Health Services, is also here. Sean O'Donnell, Acting Deputy of Chief of Public Health Services. Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief regarding White's Ferry at the end. We also have a special guest today, Will Tilburg, the Executive Director of the Maryland Department of Cannabis Administration. With that, I will pass it on to the County Executive.
Thank you, and thank everybody else for joining us today. Yesterday, we received some good news about White's Ferry in Poolesville. It makes me optimistic that we're closer to resolving the dispute that forced the ferry to close in 2020. Chuck and Stacy Kuhn, the owners of the property in Poolesville, have offered to donate the White Ferry's operations to the county. We greatly appreciate their generous donation. While the offer is to donate the ferry is a major step forward, we still need to restore public use of the ferry landing in Virginia so that it can operate. Our Department of Transportation is working with the Maryland Department of Transportation, the Virginia landowner in Loudoun County, the Loudoun County government, and the Virginia Department of Transportation as we seek a solution to this critical need. Prior to shutting down in 2020, the ferry was handling about 600 vehicles a day. This ferry is the last of what were once 100 ferries that used to operate on the Potomac River. The ferry itself dates back to the 1700s. I want to thank the work done by Dale Tibbetts over the last 4 years and Chris Conklin, and I'm optimistic we're going to be able to resolve the remaining issues, and I look forward to a positive resolution as quickly as possible. And I'll defer all questions about this transaction until the end of the briefing. I will say it'll still take about a year to get it operational by the time all of our legal stuff has been cleared and by the time all the issues are settled in Virginia. So it's not opening tomorrow, but it's at least on a path to opening. I'm going to talk a little bit today about adult cannabis use in the county and the state. I want to remind people it's been legal for almost a year now. Montgomery County leads the state with 18 open dispensaries, followed by Baltimore and Prince George's County. The first stores opened 10 months ago, and the state of Maryland says there are nearly 100 dispensaries, and sales have grown each month, with March bringing in more than $500 million in revenue. As I mentioned last year, I remain concerned about letting dispensaries advertise products, prices, or effects of the products. I believe we have to be very careful not to allow aiming of advertising at children, and it's not reasonable to expect young people to discern whether the advertising is aimed at them or whether it's aimed at adults. We also need to continue to remind people that recreational cannabis is not legal for those under 21, and it's not allowed in public spaces. So you can't walk down the street and smoke. You can't go to an outdoor assembly area and smoke. You can't do anything with cannabis that you couldn't do with alcohol. So you can't drive, can't walk in public, all those things you can't do with alcohol. You also can't do with cannabis. This week, I'm glad to welcome Maryland's Cannabis Administrator, Will Tilburg, to discuss the issue and its impact on our state. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Tilburg.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. County Executive, for your work in this area, for Montgomery County's support and partnership in an interesting year as we've transitioned to legalized adult use in the state. I'm going to focus my brief remarks on providing background on the agency that I run that you mentioned, the Maryland Cannabis Administration, touch on how legalization has gone over the last 9+ months since July 1st, and talk about some upcoming educational materials that we have available that will touch on some of the safe and responsible use that you mentioned. So first, again, I'm the director of the Maryland Cannabis Administration. This is a new agency. Maryland had a medical cannabis program beginning in 2014, at least in statute. It became operational in 2018. For the 9 or 10 years of medical, The program was run by the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission, which was a commission within the Maryland Department of Health. When Governor Moore signed the Reform Act that legalized cannabis on May 3rd of last year, the Medical Cannabis Commission and those commissioners that ran it were eliminated, and a new state agency, the Cannabis Administration, was established. And so on top of a very short timeline to stand up an industry, we also had to stand up a new agency at the same time. And over the last year, the focus of our work has been on establishing, per our statutory mandate, a safe, equitable, and accessible cannabis industry and marketplace within the state. So what does that mean? What actually does MCA do? Primarily, our work focuses in four areas. First is the licensing of cannabis businesses. Those are the licensed businesses, the growers, processors, and dispensaries, as well as the registrants, which are independent testing labs, delivery services, waste disposal, and the like. So first, licensing and registration. Second is developing rules for the businesses to comply with that touch on things like manufacturing and cultivation standards, on packaging and labeling, on advertising that Mr. County Executive, you referenced, where all advertising in the state must have an audience composition of 85% or greater adults in order for it to be permissible, and there are no outdoor signs other than dispensaries can have signs themselves. So one of the more restrictive approaches to advertising that's been taken in cannabis, due to concerns that you raised in part of attractiveness to kids and encouraging youth use, which we certainly don't want. Beyond developing those rules, we conduct inspections on businesses and enforce them. So each business in the state receives at least 4 inspections per year, announced and unannounced, to ensure compliance. And then lastly, education. This is a new industry. It is a newly legal drug, and so a large component of our work is educating stakeholders, local partners, and others on the industry, the agency, and on safe and responsible use. Looking quickly to the last 9 months of legalization, again, adult sales began on July 1st of 23. Since then, we've seen about 800 million in total medical and adult use sales, of which 500 million is related to adult use sales. The state has a 9% sales tax that is assessed at the register on adult use cannabis only. And so in the first year, we would anticipate about 700 million in adult use sales. And so that equates to about $65 million in total tax revenue for the state in the first year. Initially, the marketplace was existing medical operators that were able to convert and be hybrid medical and adult use licensees. However, last month, we conducted a license lottery to begin expanding the marketplace and awarded 170 awards to new businesses for growers, processors, and dispensaries, and are now working to vet those businesses and help them get up and running. Within Montgomery County in particular, there are 9 additional dispensary awards that have been made. And so that is the total number of additional dispensaries that we would anticipate to see over the next year or two. And as those businesses, they don't have locations yet, but as they begin that process of siting and then working through the local approval process with zoning, our office will be in touch with the county and county officials like yourself to just share where they're going to be and what to expect moving forward. Lastly, from an educational perspective, we have on our website now at cannabis.maryland.gov a new data dashboard. This shows information on total sales, on number of plants harvested, information about the patient program, where businesses are located, who's licensed, including an interactive map that shows all dispensaries within the state. We're going to continue to build this out over the next year, and it will also include inspection and sanction data related to the businesses as well. Lastly, as we inch towards April 20th, which is a holiday in the cannabis space, a new PSA campaign will be rolled out by MCA along with partners at MDOT and the Department of Health. The focus of this new ad campaign is warning of the dangers of drug driving and also educating on safe and responsible use. So first, we have new Be Cannabis Smart information that will be live on our website, cannabis.maryland.gov, beginning tomorrow, as well as digital ads, social media rolling out this week, followed by TV, radio, internet ads over the next 2 months. relating to some of the things that you talked about, Mr. County Executive, drug driving, smoke-free spaces. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's legal to use it anywhere. So information on where it is legal to consume or to smoke cannabis, and then information on safe storage to prevent accidental ingestion by youth, and also steps to prevent youth access to cannabis. So we will be sharing information with local partners, including health departments, to further educate stakeholders and the public. And you can look forward to seeing those ads beginning this week. That's all I
Thanks
have for you today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that information, Will. We'll now take questions related to this topic. If anyone has questions, please raise your hands. It looks like we have two. Christina, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, was that for me?
Kristen, yes, I'm sorry.
Christian.
Kristen, go ahead.
Hi, I actually spoke with one of your representatives earlier. I had a question regarding the security grant programs.
Oh,
I know-
so if
That's
you could
later.
actually wait for that one, we'll take questions related to cannabis, and then we'll take those ones later.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. Kelly? Sorry, you're on mute.
Okay, can everybody hear me now? I am working on a story today about White's Ferry, and I know
That
that,
comes later too.
well,
This is just a break for, this is just a break for the marijuana question because we have a guest. So when we'll finish our report, then we come back to you.
Does anyone have any questions about cannabis at all? We'll take those questions now. Going once, going twice. All right. Mr. County Executive, I will send it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tilburg. And just want to reiterate that marijuana use is for adults only. Stores face stiff penalties if they sell to children. The legal amount of pot that an individual can possess is 1.5 ounces, and up to 2 cannabis plants can be grown per residence. And it can only be consumed on private property, not in public spaces. As I said before, it's treated like alcohol. So Maryland residents are also recommended not to take cannabis across state lines because it remains illegal at the federal level. And so we can't guarantee that if you had a federal encounter that somebody would say, well, it's legal in Maryland, you're okay. So don't take that chance. Other news, yesterday we wrapped up the county's 11th annual Energy Summit. The 2-day event was a great opportunity to discuss our plan for drastically reducing greenhouse gas emissions and to highlight the vital role government business partnerships are going to play in sustainability. Throughout the conference, education focused on the latest trends in green building, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and related topics. As we work to implement our ambitious climate goals, we need to help the private sector understand its role in reducing pollution. And also, we want to educate the private sector about what programs the county has that will help assist them. To that end, one of the really exciting things that's happened in the last week is our Green Bank was announced as going to be a recipient of a large number of dollars to help with the transition to greener energy for the private sector, and also some apartments. And so we're excited about this because it's more money than we've seen before. We don't know the exact amount yet, but I know what we've seen before, and it's more than that. So this is exciting news, and it's going to help us do the work that we've been planning to do. Maryland Secretary of the Environment, Serena McElwain, delivered the keynote speech on prioritizing programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The state's on track to meet some of the significant metrics tied to the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. This includes a 60% reduction in carbon greenhouse gas emissions by 2031. The other target is carbon neutral emissions by 2045 and 100% clean grid in place by 2035. So these are some of the ambitious targets that the state has. I will say that their progress on meeting particularly the clean grid targets will help Montgomery County as well. The state's also committed to transitioning away from coal-fired power plants and scaling up renewable alternatives like solar, wind, and batteries. Like Montgomery County, They'll also look to retrofit existing buildings so that electric heat pumps and water heaters replace gas ones. And for more information on this year's event, you can visit mcenergysummit.org. I'd also like to address the issue of the budget and the so-called structural deficit. The term structural deficit implies some sort of major long-term problem, but that's not what we have. We actually don't have a structural deficit. Every year we have to recommend a budget that's balanced. This budget is balanced. Not only is it a balanced budget, it's a balanced budget with no tax increases in it. We spend many months reviewing programs and policies and asking difficult questions. And this year, we made a decision to continue funding some of the programs that we began during COVID because we have seen that while the pandemic over, the need is still great. This is acutely true in the food space, where the lines that people are reporting who run the delivery of food or the handing out of food are as long as they were during COVID. We're continuing to provide food distribution and continue to support the hubs that didn't exist before COVID. So the hubs are an important part of the county because they were something we learned during COVID is we could get services out more easily if we used the hubs and relied on our nonprofit partners than by the county trying to do everything itself. So it was a good partnership and we're keeping it in place. At the same time, I and my whole team knows that we cannot spend what we don't have. We meet with rating agencies every year. I met with 3 rating agencies again, and they review our finances and our plans, and we continue to get a AAA rating each year. And we've received praise for our local stewardship. When I became county executive, we never hit the target of 10% reserves, never. And we were constantly being warned by the rating agencies that they expected us to get there. We hit that target 2 years early in my second term of office, during COVID, no less. And the reserves have only continued to grow. In the current year, we have reserves of about 15%, 5% over the target of 10%. And the recommended budget that I recently sent to the council maintains some of that surplus and uses some of it to pay for important programs like food distribution and, frankly, some of the other programs the council asked us to include in the budget. And it still leaves reserves in excess of 11%. So we're in pretty good shape. The staff's identified this $115 million structural deficit. They arrive at the number based on future revenue forecasts, but the forecasts are not based on complete and up-to-date information. Over the past 5 years, the forecasts have been pretty much wrong. During, I think it was my first COVID budget, which would have been my second year, they actually projected that we would have I think, over $400 million shortfall. Obviously, that shortfall never occurred. And we were supposed to have a large shortfall this year. That didn't occur. So they continue to say there's going to be shortfalls and structural deficits. That's not what you're seeing in your budget. And if we had come up short, we wouldn't have been able to do the things that we were able to do with this budget. Over the let's see, the first year, like I said, we did not have the huge deficit. And we continued, I think, to be in a pretty healthy place on reserves. And cutting back on spending is absolutely unnecessary. The programs in this budget are critical. There's economic development money. There's money for food. There's a host of programs in there, some of which, as I said, the council actually asked us or created during this year that have to be funded in the following year. The problems we had this year in revenues one was a revenue problem caused by the slowdown in housing. And that's continued, with Powell at the head chair of the Fed through the inflation policies that they've adopted. And that cost us probably about a $75 to $80 million swing to the negative in revenues. We fully expect that as soon as interest rates drop, the housing market comes back, transactions will start occurring again in the normal pace. And next year's budget, if anything, is likely to have more money from the housing taxes than we had in this year's, which was severely reduced. The other thing that happened last year is the council did what they said we shouldn't do, was they told the school system, in trying to fund their budget, instead of raising taxes, they told the school system to spend $33 million of federal money that was one-time money that no longer exists, and to spend it on hiring people, fully understanding that this year's budget would have those same positions in there, but no funding to support it. So our budget supports the school system. And again, we managed to do it without the taxes. But some of the stresses in our budget are caused by decisions like last year's decision. The surplus is going to maintain our reserves, and the budget I sent to the council has 11.6% in reserves. The focus on the so-called structural deficit obscures the questions that we actually need to be asking. Are we providing the resources we need to provide to our residents, to our schools and students, to our families, to our businesses? Do we need to raise more money? Each year we make decisions about what can be funded and whether a tax increase is appropriate. And last year we knew the only way we would get through to the school funding was with a tax increase. This year obviously is not the case, so you don't see a tax increase. We have to continue investing in our county, though. You cannot pose the question, as somebody posed, that if you want to do more things, you're going to have to pay your workers less. First place, there's no connection between punishing workers and a council's desire to fund more things. Second, there's no reason to believe that government is static. I only need to look at, council actions in the last couple of weeks. $20 million that wasn't in the budget for housing, a proposal to spend another $20 million that wasn't in the budget for economic incentives, any number of projects that came across the line during the course of the year that weren't in the budget. So the idea that we're not going to do new things is just not realistic. And if we are going to do new things, it's reasonable to expect that we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. And that continues to be a challenge. I've been in the forefront of pushing for a fairer tax system. I believe that, as in Virginia and DC, they put more of their tax burden on the private sector and less of it on residents. There's no reason that Montgomery County doesn't do the same thing. And we will continue to try to get the council to address tax fairness as we go through next year's budget and through the legislative session again next year. We continue to invest heavily in the county, and we have a great county, but we need to keep making sure that we do what's needed to keep it great. Just today, I spoke at events to kick off efforts to end child hunger. That's a problem we didn't have, or a program we didn't have 5 years ago, and to expand workforce training, initiatives supported by council members again. This budget, like all the budgets, is balanced, responsible, and moves in the right direction. I look forward to working with the council, and I hope they can approve it. Recently, I had the chance to honor the heroic group of Montgomery County Police Department officers, specifically the teamwork that was required to save Sergeant Patrick Kemp's life. As you may remember, last October, a driver who was engaged in reckless high-speed driving and who had a record of taunting police with his antics struck Sergeant Kemp as he was setting stop strips in the road. Last week, after months of recovery and rehab, Sergeant Kemp was on his 2 prosthetic legs to honor 5 of his colleagues who helped him immediately after being hit. And he told the crowd that the work they did saved his life because they acted without hesitation and they got him prepared for the trip to the hospital and for emergency surgery. It was great to see these men and women recognized for their work to protect the life and help in any situation, no matter how daunting. And they weren't the only ones honored. There were almost 30 people, I think, who attended who were honored for other acts of heroism in the county last year. And it was good that everybody got the recognition they deserved. I'm hopeful that next year in Annapolis, we're going to work with state leaders to strengthen the law against dangerous and reckless driving and to protect our first responders and the public. It was a little disheartening that we had trouble getting a law through that would more severely punish people who speed at outrageous speeds, knowing that the county will not enter into a high-speed chase, which is fraught with all kinds of dangers. And so they speed without any penalty, and we need to be able to give them serious tickets that have serious penalties. We'll open this up to questions in just a moment, but I'm going to let my health team and anybody else in our government officials to provide any updates that they'd like to share. So I'll turn this over to our health folks.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. No direct comments coming from HHS today. My colleagues and I are always open to any questions from the media this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to join another press conference with you.
All right, thank you. If there is nothing further from our health team, we will now open the floor for general questions. Now's the time. Christian?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My question is directed to Dr. Stoddard. I have a question about the security grants for houses of worship, and actually let me record on my end. I'm sorry. Can I give is my request accepted? I'm sorry. Last minute.
It says you're recording, actually.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So my question is, just very briefly, this isn't the first time that places of worship in the DMV have been targeted, particularly in Montgomery County. Wat Thai in Silver Spring was targeted and robbed of nearly $20,000. Could you just briefly explain the importance of this initiative and how it'll help places of worship in the area?
Yeah, so we've had the nonprofit security grant for a number of years. Actually, we just announced the recipients for this year. I think there were 136 of them receiving $900,000 in total. County executives actually proposed an increase in that for the next fiscal year up to $1.2 million. We've seen an increase in the number of requests each year, and frankly, we've seen an increase in the number of recipients we're able to serve each year based on the continued investment from the county executive and the support from the county council. So obviously this program is done in concert with several other programs that we do to train and educate our houses of worship. The grant program is principally focused on acts of hate and bias violent hate bias events. But the reality is that the security measures that we help them enact, which are cameras, hardening of their facility, training, having off-duty police officers during their high holy days, do enhance the security of the facility to try and address the collateral things that we're talking about of theft and vandalism. And so obviously, I do believe that some of the people who were targeted happen to be recipients. And actually, in some cases, the cameras that were purchased with those grants were actually the ones that captured the information that will be helpful in finding and ultimately prosecuting the individuals who have participated in these thefts. But obviously the training pieces of it, houses of worship are designed to be open, welcoming to the public. And obviously they've got to find the right balance of being welcoming and open to the public and also being safe and secure. So we encourage them to, for example, not have their valuable, their gold and other high valuable items not to be highly visible to the public and, or potentially put them away when they're not being actively monitored with individuals there. So this is all part of an ongoing effort we've had to make our houses of worship and our nonprofits more generally secure. And we look forward to continue to support them in the future, both with this allocation of resources, but also we conduct training through our Office of Emergency Management, Homeland Security with regularity. If there's an organization that's interested in receiving that training, I'd be happy to provide a email contact for them to be able to reach out and reach out to our emergency management office to get that training scheduled.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that question, Christian. Kelly, did you have a question you wanted to ask now? You're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much for taking me. My question is about White's Ferry. When we last reported about White's Ferry in October, the owner of White's Ferry said that it would be willing to donate the property to Montgomery County if Montgomery County would put a plan in place to quickly get the ferry operational. And so I did hear Mr. Elridge say that this process could take a year or so, but I'm wondering if you could provide more specific about what the next steps are to move this process along as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So some of this is going to occur in parallel, so to speak. So we're trying to, we'll have to actually complete the legal documents for whatever transfer will happen with the Kuhn family. But, that's the first thing. And that obviously takes a little bit of time. It's not going to be something that gets signed tomorrow. The bigger issue is what it's going to take to get the Virginia landowner to allow the ferry to land there and operate. And we have been in negotiations with that owner for a very long time, but at least we know we have an owner that wants to get to a solution. So we're optimistic. We've also been working with Virginia Department of Transportation and the Loudoun County Council and as well to try to figure out, what else can be done to apply pressure or encourage the owner to come to an agreement on how to operate the ferry. We could not get the two parties to ever talk to each other. So that was a closed door. So we've had to go back and forth. But now that the county will own this, we anticipate that the owner will be willing to engage in us in the discussion. We've been able to talk to her, but we have not reached an agreement. And but I think, with this part solved, at least we don't have to deal with the tension between the two owners and the inability to open it because of that.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question, which is, what do you think is a feasible proposal to offer Libby Devlin that she might be willing to accept so that we can get the ferry operation quickly?
So no negotiator ever puts their offer on the table. So I would never say a dollar figure because then I'm, obligated to that dollar figure. So we're negotiating, and we're going to negotiate the best deal we can for the county, but it's a priority now for us to get this open. And now that we'll have the property and that we would deal directly with her in terms of operating it, the other thing I mentioned, we have to find an operator because the ferry won't operate itself. So we've got to find a company that's willing to operate this ferry. It's a little more complex. Obviously, it's not a bridge where you could just say, okay, you guys can cross the bridge now. This requires a ferry operator to actually put the pieces together. So as fast as we can, years on the outside, if we could get this done faster, we will get it done faster.
All right. Thanks for that, Kelly. Justin, take it away.
Thanks. Same topic. In discussions with Loudoun County, are you all still exploring eminent domain or other legal solutions to this problem on the Virginia side?
Well, of course, we thought eminent domain should have been used early on, but that was not Loudoun County's preference. And so if that becomes their preference, if they determine that now that we've solved the problem on our side, if there's no way to do that other than eminent domain, we hope that the county over there or the state over there would be willing to do it. But if there's a way of getting there without that, if we can reach an agreement, if there's something the state can do in Virginia that would help the Virginia owner to come to terms with this, we're happy to have it. But however it happens, it needs to happen.
Thanks for that, Justin. Heather, I think you're next. Heather, are you there? Okay, we'll move it on to Miriam.
Thank you. So just for extra clarification, the announcement yesterday said that the donation is contingent on Montgomery and Loudoun working together to find a solution. So does that mean that you have to find the solution before the donation is finalized, or you just have to agree that you will find one?
I wasn't part of that, so I cannot tell you the meaning of that language, but we've been working on this, and we believe this clears away an obstacle that had been put up by the owner on the Virginia side. So hopefully we get to a better place quickly.
And can I add in another question quickly?
Sure.
So you did touch on this, but why do you think that this move could be successful in getting the ferry reopened when previous efforts have fallen through? And I think you mentioned the tension between the owners. Is that a main part of it that's now being removed?
Yeah, I think it takes that out of the equation. There's no issue of one party not being willing to work with the other party. The party that the Virginia owner has to work with is us, and we'll be making decisions. We'll be selecting the operator. So I think we're in a place where we can actually work this out.
Thank you.
Alrighty. I'm going to call on Heather one more time. Are you there, Heather?
Hi. So, County Executive Elrich, I know you don't really want to put your cards on the table in terms of negotiations. So I'm not sure whether you can answer this or not, but the Rockland Trust before, they wanted a fee per car, and the Kuhn family wasn't amenable to that at all. They wanted to give them we'll give you a certain amount of money up front, no fee per car. Is that something that's still being considered?
Any solution is being considered that can solve this problem, as long as it's reasonable. We're obviously not going to pay far, far, far more than it's worth, but how you package the money, if at the end of the day you're talking about similar amounts of money, I'm agnostic as to which way we go.
And has Rockland Trust been more communicative with you? It sounds like the county has a much better relationship with them than the Kuhn family did.
Hi there. Kelly
That's definitely true. I mean, we've been able to talk with them. I've talked with the owner personally myself.
Exactly.
Sorry about that. It looks like Kelly put herself on mute. Was that all your questions, Heather?
Yes, thank you.
Alrighty. Does anyone else?
Let me try to send you a
Hey,
link.
Kelly, maybe we can mute her. Sorry about that, everyone. Technology. What can we do? Does anyone else have any more questions? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us again for this week media briefing. If that is it, we will see you next time. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.